Well, thank you for joining us this morning, and welcome to our three great witnesses that we have. This hearing is second in a two-part series of hearings that we are having to help guide the development of our next surface transportation reauthorization bill. Earlier this spring, we held a hearing with U.S. Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy, where he detailed how the Trump administration is administering the current law and described priorities for the next bill. Today, we'll hear from new stakeholders on their priorities. My vision for this legislation is simple but important. We want to improve the movement of people and goods. Our roads and bridges are what connect us to the people and places that matter most in our lives. They help businesses, large and small, create jobs, economic activities, and enable their competitiveness in the global marketplace. For example, my home state of West Virginia is pursuing important projects like Corridor H to better link our communities to essential services and economic opportunity. This legislation will provide the funding and establish the policies and programs that enable the improvement of the surface transportation network that we all rely on. Since the enactment of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the committee has reviewed and conducted oversight on existing programs and policies, and we've learned a lot about what is working and what isn't. The IIJA met a generational level of investment in our surface transportation network, but there have been some challenges in the implementation. We know that the highway formula programs are producing results in communities across the state. We also know that there have been some issues getting discretionary grant awards out the door and producing tangible improvements to that network. When Secretary Duffy appeared before the committee, he outlined the backlog of more than 3,200 discretionary grant awards without signed grant agreements that he had inherited from the prior administration. I appreciate the Secretary's ongoing efforts to address this backlog, and I know that the Department of Transportation is making progress in getting these agreements in place. As a matter of fact, I believe they've done over 1,000 of those already, have resolved those. We will apply the lessons learned from IIJA to shape the next bill, and those lessons have led me to three principles. I believe these principles, I have discussed these principles at our hearing with the Secretary, but I believe it's important to reiterate them today. Principle one, improving the safety, and I want to emphasize safety and reliability of America's surface transportation network with impactful investments. In recent years, we've seen an increase in the number and scope of federal transportation programs. These programs sometimes have duplicative purposes and project eligibility, and this leads to an expensive and time-intensive process to get funding out the door and lessens the impact that the legislation can make. As we craft the next bill, we must prioritize investments that instead optimize federal funding and give state partners the confidence to invest over a longer period of time. We should focus on eliminating duplicative programs and increasing funding for the highway formula programs that our states rely on and, as I said earlier, have a proven track record of success. Principle two, reforming and modernizing federal programs and policies to create efficiency. We all know that as currently structured, federal requirements can add red tape that increase costs and slow down the completion of projects. We all want to deliver transportation benefits faster and save money for the American taxpayer. To achieve this goal, we need to take a serious look at federal requirements to determine how we can create certainty for the partners who make these projects happen and ensure that the public receives the benefits of these investments quickly. Principle three, addressing the variety of surface transportation needs across all states. Obviously, different states have different needs, and we'll, I think, hear about that today. I wouldn't expect West Virginia, with our mountainous peaks and valleys, to which Senator Curtis is not here to tell me how much more mountainous his state is, so we'll just say we're the mountain state. That's right, to prioritize the same transportation projects as other states. We need to avoid top-down mandates from Washington, D.C. and give states the flexibility to address the individual improvements that their communities need. It will take collaboration from my Senate colleagues, the Trump administration, and our stakeholders to complete this bill before the IIJA expires in September of 2026. We must be pragmatic, work in a bipartisan fashion to deliver a bill that sets us up for a productive conversation on this reauthorization effort with our colleagues in the House. I'm really grateful. I know many of you traveled far to the witnesses that have joined us today, and I look forward to learning about these priorities. This is an excellent opportunity ahead of us to make a pivotal impact on our surface transportation network. Each of us knows how important that network is and the role that it plays in keeping our country's economy and people on the move. I'm excited to get to work and continue the EPW's committee's bipartisan tradition of developing legislation that delivers for the American people. Ranking Member Whitehouse, I now recognize you for your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman, for this hearing. Thank you to the witnesses for being here. Welcome particularly to Mayor Gallego, who will be introduced later by her Arizona kinsman, Senator Kelly. As we consider the next surface transportation reauthorization bill, I'd be remiss not to remind everyone that Democrats will have no reason to do a bill if we have an administration that will not faithfully execute the laws, meaning both sides of any compromise we reach. On the bright side, DOT has made substantial progress obligating money to hundreds of previously frozen grants. New draft guidance for the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, NEVI, was submitted to the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. This is progress. But NEVI is still stalled at OIRA, and periodic threats continue to politically disfavored projects like high-speed rail and congestion pricing. I want to get a bill done, and I have given my team the green light to work on details. DOT is moving in the right direction, particularly when compared to the dumpster fire of political corruption at the Environmental Protection Agency. Here in Congress, there's bipartisan agreement about strong federal commitment to our infrastructure. But the American Society of Civil Engineers still gives our roads a D+. We have more than 43,000 bridges still classified as structurally deficient. 39% of our public roads are still in poor or mediocre condition. Close to 40,000 people still die each year on our roadways in the wealthiest country in the world. Our directive is clear: work together to build on the early successes of the IIJA and further improve our transportation infrastructure. As we do this, prudent investments must account for anticipated conditions. Annual costs for climate-related damage to road and rail infrastructure are expected to reach nearly $20 billion a year by 2050, with approximately $1.5 billion in costs for bridges alone. A recent report by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and Allstate found that for every dollar invested in infrastructure resilience, communities across the country save $13 in post-disaster losses. 1 to 13 is smart spending. I thank DOT for finalizing the Protect Grant agreement for the historic and beautiful Mount Hope Bridge in Rhode Island just last week. That Protect program recognizes that climate change is a real driver of infrastructure risk and that investments in resilience now save big money in the long run. Pollution-driven climate change is costing lives and livelihoods. To pretend otherwise is to abdicate our moral and fiscal responsibility. The next reauthorization bill must and will take climate change seriously. We may not have to say it, but we have to do it. Transportation is the largest source of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. 1.8 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide into our atmosphere each year, more than a quarter of total U.S. emissions. Just last week, 4 communities were ravaged by 1-in-1,000-year rainstorms. Climate change is making floods like those in Texas, North Carolina, New Mexico, and Illinois more intense, more deadly, and more frequent. Homeowners insurance in coastal and wildfire risk areas is collapsing, taking down real estate values, and presenting a systemic financial danger to our economy. Our transportation system is driving this climate upheaval, and that in turn challenges the functionality of our transportation system. In addition to climate safety, the next reauthorization bill must prioritize roadway safety. The persistently high number of traffic fatalities and their immeasurable pain and suffering is unacceptable. This is not just driver and passenger safety, but the safety of those walking, biking, and working on construction sites or responding to emergencies. Many of our roads that are in poor condition are the local roads that carry a large share of our vehicle miles traveled, exacerbating the safety risks. As we put pen to paper on this next transportation package, let us be clear-eyed, let us follow the evidence, let us make the investments in our transportation systems that reduce emissions, that prioritize safety, that bolster resilience, and that meet the real-life needs of the communities we serve. With that, I look forward to working together with the chair and my Republican colleagues on this bill, and I look forward to hearing the perspectives of our witnesses.
Thank you. So next, I will turn to Senator Kramer to introduce our first witness for this meeting. So Senator Kramer, you're now recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Capito and Ranking Member Whitehouse. Chairman, let me just start out by promising you that unlike Senator Curtis, Governor Armstrong and I have no intention of bragging about how much bigger our mountains are than yours. We'll just yield to that. So it is a really great honor for me to represent my governor and a former member of Congress. Kelly Armstrong is actually years of service are very similar to mine in the sense that every time he won an election, he improved the institution that he went to because he replaced me in the House of Representatives, including on the Energy and Commerce Committee. And he also serves on the Judiciary Committee, which, as you know, Madam Chairman, is not a small task in the House of Representatives to be on Energy and Commerce and have such another such important office. But Kelly, what's interesting to me about Governor Armstrong is he's not naturally a politician at all. In fact, he's quite naturally the opposite. He is a successful business person. He's a lawyer that's not even ashamed to say it. He's a graduate of the University of North Dakota, where he got both his degrees, his undergraduate and his law degree. He served in the state Senate, which is, in my mind, where the rubber meets the road. And then, of course, like I said, in Congress, and now as our governor. Kelly, to me, it seems like you're still a new governor. I don't know how it feels to you, having been through one legislative session. You may feel much more experienced, but Governor Armstrong brings that perspective. And as I look forward to hearing from the mayor, I think for all of us up here, it's really, really important to remember that there's probably no better illustration of the juxtaposition of the relationship between the federal government, local and state governments than in infrastructure. It's actually legitimate in the Constitution, right, interstate commerce. And so Kelly brings that very important perspective from a rural state that produces a lot of things that we don't consume in our own state, or at least we don't consume nearly in the supply that we provide to a hungry world and a growing economy, whether it's energy or food or how you get semolina wheat to the mill to turn it into flour, or durum wheat to turn it into semolina flour, to get it to a pasta plant, to get it to the restaurant in New York. He understands it all, and he understands the relationship, and I'm really grateful he's here. But beyond all those other things that Kelly has done, he is, most of all, and what he's really, really good at is he's a very experienced youth baseball coach. And that's really where the rubber meets the road. And so with that, Madam Chair, it's just my honor to introduce Governor Kelly Armstrong.
Thank you, Senator Kramer. And I would mention that Governor Armstrong is testifying here on behalf of the National Governors Association this morning. And I will say to all of you out there, today is the Congressional Women's Softball game. We are playing at Audi Stadium tonight at 7:30. It's going to be televised. I'm the only senator playing, so we better get through that vote-a-rama quickly so I can get there. But this is how I met Governor Armstrong. He helped coach and coached us, I think, over on the third baseline for one of our games. So it's really great to see you, and I welcome your testimony, Governor.
I don't. Thank you, Chairman Capito, Ranking Member Whitehouse, and Senator Kramer for that introduction, and members of the committee. Before I get into my remarks, I would say, if we're going to talk that much about baseball and softball, anybody who thinks being a state senator or being a trial lawyer is the best preparation for Congress is wrong. The best preparation for Congress is dealing with youth sports parents. So thank you for the opportunity to testify today and offer the state perspective as this committee continues its work on surface transportation reauthorization. I have the honor of serving as the 34th governor of the state of North Dakota. In rural states like ours, transportation infrastructure isn't merely about convenience, it's a pillar of our communities and thriving local economies. Our highways, roads, and bridges are essential lifelines connecting our agricultural producers, energy industry, small businesses, and families to markets, healthcare, education, and emergency services. North Dakotans drive over 12,000 miles a year, and we're the geographic center of North America. And as Senator Kramer mentioned in his introduction, we produce a lot of things the world needs. We're very proud of the fact that we provide calories and energy to a world that continues to ask for more and more and more of those to continue what is the greatest economy in the history of the world. We put a lot of miles on. Unlike DC, where many people don't own a car and rely on public transit, our citizens depend heavily on personal vehicles to reach their destination. We have teenagers driving farm trucks, senior citizens driving hundreds of miles for doctor's appointments, and students driving 20 miles one way for a baseball or a basketball practice. The roads in our state are not just for North Dakotans. Investment in rural highways benefits the entire nation. The movement of people and goods from the coast across North Dakota and other rural states benefits people and businesses at both ends. Good roads in states like ours are essential to getting ag, energy, and other products to national world markets. My request for the committee today is simple. Continue providing robust funding, giving maximum flexibility to states, and watch us go to work. A key piece of ensuring states can successfully and efficiently build projects is formula-based funding. The next highway bill should maintain or increase the percentage of program dollars distributed by formula, allowing states to more quickly deliver critical transportation projects. This is especially important in states like North Dakota that don't have that long of a construction season. Although discretionary grant programs play a role in our infrastructure funding, the process is often inefficient, slow, and costly. In some cases, it can take up to 18 months between an award and grant announcement. I can give you a specific example. In June 2023, the North Dakota Department of Transportation was awarded $30 million railroad crossing elimination grant from the Federal Railroad Administration. The grant will fund a long overdue grade separation project in Grand Forks, a city with nearly 60,000 residents and home to my alma mater, the University of North Dakota. Secretary Buttigieg came to Grand Forks. We welcomed him in. We were excited about the project. As of today, more than 2 years later, the North Dakota DOT is still awaiting execution of the grant. And in our first legislative session, we had to appropriate $20 million in state DOT money because of the cost increase that is associated with that 2-year delay. We're very, very appreciative of the money. We're very, very appreciative of the award. But the delay alone is an expense that was never anticipated, never dealt with. And we'll fix it. We'll get it done. We're excited about it. It's important, but it was unnecessary. Delays in discretionary grant programs are problematic, regardless of their geographic location. However, in a state with a short construction window, the negative impacts of these delays are magnified. While discretionary grant programs serve an important purpose, I encourage this committee to increase to the extent possible the percentage of dollars delivered via formula. Additionally, I ask you to consider including provisions that give states more flexibility to deploy funds that they need most. The Bipartisan Highway Funding Transportability Improvement Act from Senator Kramer and also Brooks will do just that by increasing the percentage of funds departments of transportation can transfer between accounts. States know their needs, and this legislation will enhance our ability to make the best decisions for our unique situations. Robust funding is important, but all the money in the world, and quite frankly, we could appropriate less money if we streamline the permitting process. We would take less money from the federal government every single day if we could get a shovel in the ground faster. And so I appreciate the opportunity to be here, but and just would end with, thank you so much for having us. Thank you for all you have done to help us build infrastructure in North Dakota, and I look forward to the questions.
Thank you, and thank you. I'm sure your voice is loud and clear for all the other 49 governors and others. Our next witness is Austin Ramirez, the CEO of Husco International Incorporated. He's testifying on behalf of the National Association of Manufacturers today. Mr. Ramirez became CEO of Husco in 2011, taking over from his father, Gus Ramirez. Today, Husco has over $500 million in annual sales, employs over 1,500 people worldwide, and has a global footprint. They specialize in high-performance hydraulic and electromechanical components. Mr. Ramirez will share his perspective as a user of the transportation network that relies on safe roads and bridges to get people to work and products to market. I would note in his bio, he was an All-American swimmer at the University of Virginia. Wahoo wah for you. So, Mr. Ramirez, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Capito, for the generous introduction. And good morning, Ranking Member Whitehouse and members of the committee. My name is Austin Ramirez, and I'm proud to serve as the President and CEO of Husco. Thank you for the opportunity to testify about the importance of modern infrastructure to U.S. manufacturing and to provide manufacturers' views on surface transportation reauthorization. Husco is a family-owned business based in Waukesha, Wisconsin. We make vital components used in the cars you drive and the equipment that powers construction. For nearly 80 years, we have been an economic driver in our local community, providing thousands of family-supporting careers. We are also a business with a purpose, guided by the values of opportunity and service. Husco is the top corporate philanthropic donor in Wisconsin. We have built schools and welcomed refugees. These values reflect my family's story. My dad, Gus, was born in Puerto Rico. He came to this country at the age of 6 and pursued the American dream, graduating from our nation's top universities. Over several decades, Gus went from working at Husco to leading it as a standalone company. Under our family's leadership, revenues have grown from $20 million in 1985 to over $500 million today. Husco is an American success story. We represent the possibility and prosperity created by a strong manufacturing sector, an industry that employs 13 million people and contributes $2.9 trillion to the U.S. economy. When manufacturing wins, America wins. But our competitiveness depends on decisions made here in Washington. We need policymakers to promote a comprehensive strategy to grow U.S. manufacturing. Such a strategy must include continuing investments in our nation's surface transportation infrastructure. Modern, dependable transportation helps manufacturers make and move our products. And these projects generate productivity gains and induce demand for manufactured goods, stimulating the economy and bolstering American competitiveness. At Husco, we see these benefits directly. Our customers are in the automotive and construction industries. And Husco families drive over the roads and bridges improved by highway projects. Several are turning dirt this year in Waukesha County. To realize these benefits, however, we need a federal government to be efficient and remove red tape. Permitting reform must be part of any comprehensive manufacturing strategy. Congress should seize the opportunity to support manufacturers like Husco through continued infrastructure investment. We cannot go back to the fits and starts of highway bill extensions. Our industry needs certainty to invest, plan, and hire in America. Manufacturers are ready to do our part to get a bill done this Congress. We champion the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, a historic effort made possible by the leadership of this committee. And we commend your leadership now as you look to drive the next highway bill to enactment. As you begin this work, manufacturers respectfully encourage you to consider several policy proposals that will support our growth and success. First, we ask that you continue to make robust investments in our surface transportation infrastructure. Manufacturers recognize the importance of ensuring efficiency in government spending, and we support long-term solutions for the Highway Trust Fund. Second, Congress should strengthen supply chains. Manufacturers depend on the movement of freight, but industry surveys have shown repeated supply chain challenges. Surface transportation legislation should continue to expand highway capacity, connectivity, and support our nation's freight network through intermodal improvements. Finally, Congress must make the reforms necessary to get these projects actually completed. The vast majority of manufacturers say that our complex permitting laws impact investment decisions. We need to fix this broken system and stop endless litigation. Doing so will unlock growth potential across manufacturing and empower infrastructure investments that help companies like Husco compete. As a small manufacturer in the heartland of America, I appreciate the committee's work to continue investments that support manufacturing. Manufacturers like Husco strongly support your efforts to advance bipartisan surface transportation reauthorization. To put it simply, investments in infrastructure are investments in manufacturing. Our industry depends on a robust, modern, efficient transportation system, and you can promote domestic manufacturing by getting a highway bill done this Congress. Thank you for inviting me to testify today to share Husco's story. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ramirez. And now I want to turn to Senator Kelly, who will introduce our final witness.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm excited to welcome my friend and the Mayor of Phoenix, Kate Gallego, to the committee. Mayor Gallego is only the second woman to be elected the mayor of Phoenix, and she's one of the youngest big city mayors in the country. and certainly the best. Now, Mayor Gallego has a wealth of transportation policy experience that I know will be critical to this committee's discussion today. During the Biden administration, she served as chair of the Transforming Transportation Advisory Committee, and she continues to serve as chair of Climate Mayors, a bipartisan network of nearly 350 mayors across the country who are leading cities to meet their sustainability goals. And as a lead negotiator of the CHIPS and Science Act, I work closely with Mayor Gallego to boost domestic semiconductor manufacturing in Arizona and bring the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company to Phoenix. And this critical investment is generating thousands of jobs, and it's cementing our state as a global hub for microchip manufacturing. It's also part of the growth that's fueling the region that requires smart investments in transportation infrastructure to keep up. Mayor Gallego, thank you for testifying today as the committee discusses the upcoming surface transportation reauthorization. I know how valuable it will be to learn from your experience about what Congress can do to meet the transportation needs of urban areas while ensuring that our infrastructure remains resilient in the face of climate change. So with that, Madam Chair, hand it back to you.
Thank you. Welcome, Mayor, and we look forward to your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Capito, Ranking Member Whitehouse, Senator Kelly. Thank you for the wonderful introduction and invitation, members of the Senate. I'm grateful for the invitation to testify today on surface transportation reauthorization. I'm honored to share my perspective and offer insight from local government. I have the great privilege of serving as mayor of the 5th largest city in the United States. More than 1.7 million people call Phoenix home. That's more than the population of 11 states. We have a lot of people and a lot of roads, nearly 5,000 miles. We own hundreds of bridges. Throughout my time as mayor and before that as a member of the City Council, improving our transportation infrastructure has been a top priority for me. I served as chair of our MPO, the Maricopa Association of Governments, and helped lead our transit authority, Valley Metro. I serve as co-chair of Accelerator for America, which operates the National Infrastructure Advocacy Coalition, United for Infrastructure. Madam Chair, we were so grateful to you for kicking off our Infrastructure Week event this year. I chaired the USDOT Transforming Transportation Advisory Committee, a national panel that advised on how to use technology to improve surface transportation. Our work included tools to speed project delivery, as well as how to best use AI and automation. I also serve as chair of Climate Mayors, where I have the privilege of working with a bipartisan network of nearly 350 of my colleagues to work towards making our communities safer and more resilient. Recently, our coalition had the honor of speaking with Ranking Member Whitehouse. It was a perfect showcase of how the direct collaboration benefits our levels of government. That's why I'm excited to speak with you today. The Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act was revolutionary for our city. It's essential that the funding levels from that law continue, or better yet, increase, to allow states, tribes, and local governments to carry on the essential work that the law spearheaded. One thing I know is top of mind for all of us is safety. With an average of 30,000 crashes annually and an average of 2 crashes resulting in serious injuries every single day, NHTSA has consistently ranked Phoenix in the top 3 cities in the nation for overall traffic fatalities. That is not a point of pride. As a mayor, among the moments that stick with me the most in this job are the tragedies that involve children. Both as a mom and a local leader, there's nothing worse than seeing a child get hurt. One moment I will always carry with me is speaking with the father of a young woman who was killed due to a traffic accident. He gave me a picture of her and asked me to work hard to make sure it never happens again. I still have her photo. As a result of the Safe Streets and Roads for All program, we've been able to address some of the safety issues on the roads that took his daughter's life. This grant allowed us to implement proven safety measures designed to address issues involving pedestrians, transit riders, and drivers on a very critical corridor. Another challenge that Phoenix faces is rising temperatures. Just last week, we hit 118 degrees. Our highway infrastructure is required to face this reality head-on and has to be built and maintained differently. It must be resilient. Programs such as Protect and Senator Kelly's Healthy Streets Initiative would help cities to implement essential initiatives such as cool pavement. Infrastructure benefits our economy and our national security. When I was recruiting our largest economic development deal, a semiconductor manufacturer, to come to Phoenix, I spoke about our commitment to investing in transportation infrastructure to support their investment. That mattered. TSMC is now investing $165 billion in our city, and the federal government has partnered with us to invest in freeway infrastructure to support these advanced industry jobs. This partnership means that we, Americans, now make the most advanced chips in the world again in our country, important for our national security. In the upcoming Surface Transportation Reauthorization Bill, I encourage Congress to invest more directly to local governments, tribal governments, and MPOs, in addition to states. More than 75% of road miles are owned by cities and counties. In addition, local governments own and operate more than half of our bridges and the majority of our public transit systems. Local leaders drive the same roads as our constituents every day, and we're well equipped to determine where to make key investments. The discretionary programs in IIJ help cities, including mine, tremendously, and Congress should continue to invest in those programs to meet the needs of communities today. Phoenix is a growing city whose best days are still ahead of it. With continued help from Congress, who has so often been a key partner of cities, America's infrastructure will be safer, more resilient, better maintained, and more responsive to the needs of each community. Thank you for your time. Look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. And I will kick it off with a sort of general question to everybody on the panel. You've, in each individual ways, you've talked about the importance of the surface transportation network and what reauthorization will mean to you in terms of economic and job growth. But I want to dig down a little bit more on that. Is it the predictability, the affordability, the flexibility? What would you point to as, from your standpoint as governor, and then we'll go down the panel, to how this will impact your economic growth and job creation abilities?
Thank you, Madam Chair. All of the above, but I think, you know, I have the opportunity to serve here too. We spend money inefficiently, and we're required to do that because you go a decade without any increase in funding, and then things turn into whatever. The more predictability and foresight you can push onto us, the less money we will spend to build the same project.
So would you say the predictability factor would be get this bill in by the end of September of 2026 so you can have the predictability for the next 5 or 6 years?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
That would be a worthy goal. And then I also think like I said, our perspective, each state is different, but I don't think any community or any state in the country has the amount of money they need to fix their roads
Right.
and bridges, whatever, so they can prioritize their projects. They know which ones are permitted at the state or county level. They know which ones that they can divert. They can start doing, the workforce shortage exists all over the country, so the earlier you can do that, and the more flexibility you can, like with Senator Kramer and Senator Alsobrooks' bill, then we can divert and move things around to work. It's not just about like picking winners and losers. It's we know which project's ready to go.
Right.
And
Right.
we know which one we're going to have to wait another construction cycle to do.
Right.
So.
Right. Mr. Ramirez, how would this impact your ability to grow?
You know, I mentioned supply chain in my comments, and I think
Yes.
that's a real issue. We've got rural facilities, and having, surface transportation to those facilities that is efficient and well-maintained is really important. But, another really big one is my main facility is outside Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and the main east-west corridor, I-94, has been caught up in litigation for years. And so I've got employees that spend, hours a day stuck in traffic because we can't execute projects that we've already agreed to do.
So that project is still waiting to be completed? Is that, I'm not unfamiliar with that. Is that,
Yes, ma'am.
wow. That's a major corridor for you. Yeah. Mayor, do you have a comment on how this will impact your ability to grow? You kind of alluded to it in your comments.
Absolutely. I think we all share a goal for American infrastructure being the best in the world. This committee has moved that forward, but we have an enormous backlog. We appreciate the leadership on starting early. Certainty helps us. Same with the governor. The earlier we can hire and plan, the less it costs, and the more we can do better. Phoenix is proud to be one of the homes of the Mayo Clinic. In our case, they're in North Phoenix in an area that has a lot of infrastructure challenge, including a major floodplain. There's a huge bridge where if we could get that built, it would expedite their ability to expand. They have come up with incredible research that has reduced the risk of cancer, heart disease, and more. The whole country benefits from the innovation that is happening there. They need investments in infrastructure to be able to expand and do that work. It's literally life-saving, and so the work you're doing here today matters so much to us.
Well, good, you led me right into my next question, because this is one of my pet projects for the surface transportation, as it was in the past, is our bridges. I mean, our nation's bridges, I can speak for my state personally, we have a lot of bridges, small state, but a lot of bridges, and we have some that are considered, you can still use them, but in another 5 to 10 years, it's questionable whether you're going to be able to use them. There's also, and they're so expensive to repair and fix and inconvenient, as Mr. Ramirez was saying. So, Governor, does having a set aside for bridges help you, or would you rather have the flexibility to decide if you're going to use that for bridges or not?
The state of North Dakota owns over 1,700 bridges. There's 4,800 bridges total in the state of North Dakota. So I would tell you that if you had a set aside for bridges, no matter what the federal government gave us, it wouldn't be enough. I would say we have to do a better job at our level. Again, we don't have mountains or all of that. But you wouldn't build a grid infrastructure for bridges in North Dakota in 2025 the same way you did it in 1925.
Right.
So I think we can help make a better case to the federal government by saying we are prioritizing these things. And this is how we're going to do it. But I wouldn't be opposed to a set aside for bridges because there's no.
Well,
way
there
it'll be
is
enough.
one, so I think there has been one, and I'm very much committed to that. I would also say, your point on whether you would rebuild in 2025 as you built in 1925 really leads me to my next senator here, because that's the resiliency portion of the bill that I think is exceedingly important. Not only does it save money, it saves lives, and it's much safer. So, Senator Whitehouse?
Thank you, Chairman. Welcome, Mayor Gallego. Appreciate you being here. What are the particular challenges that 118-degree weather presents to your regional transportation system? I mean, can you even wait for a bus in that kind of weather?
Our weather can be dangerous. We had 31 straight days above 110. Workplace safety really matters. I appreciate that you both emphasize how important that is. We hope surface transportation reauthorization will make sure that as construction contracts go forward, we honor the men and women who are building America. We have to make sure that they're structured so that safety is part of the areas we incentivize the most, because construction in 118 can be dangerous.
Yep.
We don't want least cost bids that say you can't take breaks for water and shade, because those abilities to cool yourself down matter so much to our community. Similar to North Dakota, the way we build bridges today is not what the way we built in 1925 is not what we would do today. We didn't have the challenge of 31 straight days above 110. So we want the flexibility to use pavement and construction techniques that make sense for our climate, that can deal with the expanding and contracting. We're so grateful that Congress appropriated money for bridges. Right now, how it's structured, that money goes primarily to the states. And as the governor mentioned, they don't maintain every bridge. Phoenix maintains bridges directly, so we would love to be eligible for that money. We have bridges that things are falling off of right now, and we want to be able to make sure that they're safe and that we keep our constituents ready. And again, we want to, at least in Phoenix, be able to use certain building materials that tend to be lighter in color so they don't maintain the dark heat. When you wear a black t-shirt, you get hot more easily than a white t-shirt. Same principles with building materials. We just hit 97 as the overnight low. We used to cool off a lot more at night, and building materials matter in that.
When I visited Phoenix some time ago, I met with the city's emergency management and law enforcement people who pointed out that they were having staffing issues in the heat, because responding, for instance, to a regular car wreck could require a lot more people, because the heat effect on the first responders could be such that they need to be actually switched out on a pretty regular schedule, say responding to a fire, for instance, and that you needed people who are there to help cool them down so that the payroll load for the same task had gone up considerably because of the dangers of trying to work, particularly with protective gear on in that kind of an environment. Is that still the case?
That is still the challenge. For us, we now need to have mobile cooling units on site at fires so that our firefighters can cycle in and out. Like West Virginia, we are home to beautiful mountains. Phoenix is proud to have the largest urban mountain park of any big city. But when our firefighters go in and have to do multiple rescues in a day, it's dangerous. I've called firefighters who've been hospitalized after doing these rescues because it is so hot, and often they will have to carry the weight of human beings. We try to pre-position ice throughout the city to cool people's bodies down. It's a real challenge, and vulnerable populations are impacted the most by the heat.
Yeah. Mr. Ramirez, you mentioned in your testimony clean school buses, which is something dear to my heart because in addition to everything else, the school buses have kids in them and they go around neighborhoods and they have fairly standard routes, so they're pretty easy to put a charging schedule on, and they don't spew particles and exhaust into neighborhoods as they go around and as they idle. How would we best, in a highway bill, try to gather into our decisions some of those benefits that aren't kind of instantly in the program of, for instance, kids waiting for the school bus to pick them up, having clean air to breathe at the school bus stop instead of school bus exhaust to breathe?
It's a great comment. I think anytime you do a major investment, you need to look holistically at all the positives and negatives associated with that. I'll tell you, our business is making components for automotive applications, including things like school buses. And almost every new product that we manufacture has something to do with emissions and efficiency. And that's true on the internal combustion engine side as well. If we can improve every internal combustion engine by 5%, that has a huge impact on the environment that our kids and our cities are dealing with, just as much as making electric vehicles go further for every charge.
And do you think a pollution tax or fee would be a sensible thing to look at to fund infrastructure improvements?
I don't know that I have a position on the right way to do it. I think considering environmental impact is certainly appropriate.
Thank you.
Senator Kramer?
Thank you. Thank you all. This has been very, very interesting. And you've done a great job, by the way, of answering my first two questions, so I won't repeat them. Although I will say, my first two questions would have been about formula funding and the importance of that, and the flexibility within the formula to do the things that are important in a city or a state, and I appreciate all of that. What we haven't talked about yet, though, is adequate funding. Where do we get this revenue from? And it's interesting because as you all know, we are the pay for, the pay to use system is what our highway system's built on, except it's completely dependent on people who pay gas tax, largely. And yet not all vehicles utilize gas, or at least, and even the ones that do utilize less of it or use less of it. And yet this becomes such a major political struggle, not among us so much as out there, because it's so misunderstood oftentimes. So I'd like each of you, perhaps, particularly the governor and the mayor, to talk about any ideas you might have about how we approach, whether it's electric vehicles, even hybrids, and having some sort of a way for them to pay to use this system in a way that's not offensive to everybody. And now I am asking for political counsel, quite honestly. So I'll start with the governor.
I think that you kind of hit it. I'll just start with the gas tax part of it. I mean, we had a bill in the state legislature to raise the gas tax that didn't pass. I think we run into if you're going to raise any tax, a use tax is significantly more. I always get a little concerned about vehicles miles driven. I've written 500 briefs on the Fourth Amendment throughout the course of my life, and I don't know exactly. One, North Dakota drives a lot. I think Wyoming's number one, but we're in the top 10. So you would negatively impact states like mine. But I think a real conversation about, I'll back up. I think if you can deploy the money faster and allow us to do things faster, that's what I think is the easiest version for adequate funding, because we don't need as much. And if we have more flexibility and we can do it quicker, we can do that. But I think it's a real conversation. I mean, every car, combustion or otherwise, is driving a lot more on that 18.3 cents of that is being taken in. And I think that as you get more and more other vehicles on the road, there is going to be a disparity there.
But didn't North Dakota, I know most states have a registration fee of some sort now that's applicable to all vehicles. Is that at least a way to get to it?
Yeah, I think at the state level, I think that's appropriate. I think whatever four-tired vehicle that ends up on the road is going to utilize that road and is going to require maintenance and upkeep and all of those things. And you can incentivize. I mean, there's a lot of political reasons that different people incentivize things. I mean, we're just talking about school buses. I hope they exempt places that have a shortage of school bus drivers, so we actually have schools getting out early and I mean, and running schools, and they're driving 200, 300, 400 miles a day in that single school bus, so.
Yeah. Mayor, maybe you could address the same thing, because it seems to me that with this large dependence on federal funding, it just doesn't seem right to me that certain categories of vehicles aren't paying what I would consider to be their fair share for the cost of building and maintaining these roads. Do you have a thought or a solution on that?
It's important to me that we adequately fund the National Highway Trust Fund. Phoenix is a proud member of the National League of Cities, and the league has produced 7 principles around this item. We would like to make sure it's adequate funding. We want to protect privacy. Any new solution, we think technology needs to be ready to go on day one. This is so essential, we have to get it right. And so I'll share those principles in my written testimony, but I think they're a good guide for how we can improve in this area.
Thank you. In the area of permitting, or maybe just reform in general, and you've all spoken to the efficiency issues, do any of you have just some solid closing recommendations for ensuring that infrastructure projects do move faster, get permitted, move faster, while also maintaining a high level of environmental protection? I'll start with you, Mr. Ramirez.
Thank you, Senator Kramer. You know, this is a really complicated topic, but I actually think the solutions are pretty simple. We need deadlines in the regulatory process that are enforceable, and we need limited expedited judicial review. I think if we do those two things, we'll actually get infrastructure dollars from being approved and allocated to actually being spent and invested in new projects.
Counselor, would you support expedited judicial review?
I would, and I think the one agency permitting process at the federal level, I think you all have a unique opportunity, because a lot of the fights that are associated with infrastructure reform don't apply to roads, but try getting a bridge permitted across a federal waterway. And we're not building new ones, we're replacing an existing one. But every one of our constituents wants this kind of infrastructure, and you don't get into some of the ideological fights that exist in transmission or pipelines or some of those things.
Sure. Thank you all.
Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to all three of you. Mayor Gallego, good to see you again. Want to recognize that Phoenix recently hosted yet another Super Bowl, which didn't just put the city of Phoenix in a national and international spotlight, but places significant demands on the city's infrastructure. I'm asking this question because in the next 3 years, California will host a couple of Super Bowls, as well as the World Cup and the 2028 Summer Olympics. And so based on your experience, what can the federal government do to better support cities as they prepare for the transportation challenges of hosting large major events?
Our Super Bowl was successful because of a partnership with the federal government. We were able to use the New Starts program to expand our transit system. Often with these major sporting events, everyone stays till the last minute. And that means that they're all leaving at once. The transit system was very important for moving people. We were able to, in partnership with the federal government, expand the tarmac at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. We had much more traffic when we were hosting that major event. I did want to note, though, people with private planes apparently left at a high rate right after the Super Bowl halftime show, which was not obvious to me would happen. New buses were really important to us because we had to dramatically expand our fleet. I should note, in past Olympics, Phoenix has helped other cities that are host communities by lending buses, and I think all working together, we can help make sure it is a great experience. Our country is in the international spotlight, and it's in all of our best interest to make sure that works well. Not this community's jurisdiction, but the safety dollars you all sent are very important. Unfortunately, we're in a world where every pretty much city is investing in things like vehicle barriers, trying to learn from what happened in communities like New Orleans, and that done in partnership with the federal government.
Right, those are the big two, security and transportation. Back to the Super Bowl experience again, are there any specific investments or flexibilities that could have been additionally helpful for the city that we should consider as we're crafting the next bill?
I think we would, again, because we often build our systems for the average transportation users, and these events cause such a huge spike, we would love that the federal government understand the huge variety and look at funding for peak levels, because you will hit an all-time peak in every mode of transportation in Southern California, and we ought to consider that in our planning. So that's a way we might need to modernize. It's important to us that security dollars and transportation dollars go hand in hand. Our transportation system does have some vulnerabilities, and so we need to plan ahead. We saw during the Paris Olympics, one of the most dangerous safety threats was to their train system, and so we ought to learn from that and plan ahead.
Yeah, I was there when that happened. So thank you for that. I may have some follow-up questions both on that topic as well as the heat stress, heat island effects, and some of the initiatives that you're pioneering. I know it came up earlier in the hearing, but wanted to associate myself with that as a concern and as a need.
Thank you for your leadership on that topic. It will save lives.
And colleagues, I'll call your attention to the map of current fires out west. So we have a lot of work cut out for us. But in my time remaining, I do want to ask a question of Mr. Ramirez on a different topic. The bipartisan infrastructure law provided $2.25 billion for the Port Infrastructure Development Program to strengthen our nation's ports and freight systems. We know that these investments are part of a broader effort to expand capacity and keep goods moving more efficiently and reliably across the country. Now, you mentioned in your testimony that supply chain issues are a primary business challenge for nearly a third of manufacturers. So can you talk about the need for continued investment in port infrastructure in our efforts to keep goods moving efficiently?
Thank you for the question, Senator Padilla. Absolutely. So Husco is a global company. We've got facilities around the world. We've got suppliers around the world. We both import a lot of components from the rest of the world into our U.S. facilities, and we export products that we make in our U.S. facilities around the world. So certainly ports are an absolutely critical part of the supply chain infrastructure that we have to deal with, and has been an issue with congestion over the years.
So any suggestions as to not just to maintain changes, additions to the port components of transportation legislation?
I think continued investment in technology and how we load and unload containers can make a huge difference in throughput for our ports.
Modernization and new fuel sources like hydrogen. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Husted.
Thank you, Chairwoman Capito, and thank you to all of you for being here today. I represent the state of Ohio. We call ourselves the heart of it all because you make everything, right? We have agriculture, we have manufacturing, we have a lot of things. I will brag for a moment that in the recent CNBC ratings of best states to do business, we were number 5, and we've got number 1 rating in infrastructure. And I have been involved in those issues over the years, and one of the things, the reason that we were rated number 1 is because we've invested the money. We've actually asked people to sacrifice by paying a little bit more so that we could have quality infrastructure, to make roads safer, to make sure that the infrastructure serves our manufacturing capacity, and those things matter a lot. And so, and different states take different approaches. Some states have very hot weather that affects their roads. Some have freezing, thawing. We know salt all of those things on the roads, and it really impacts the things that we do. And I just am interested in advice from each of your perspective on, as we think about our highway infrastructure and and what we're doing for our roads, bridges, and new technologies and adoption. So what advice do you have for us as we consider how to fund those things and regulate those things going forward? I'll start with you, Governor Armstrong.
My advice to my colleagues when I was here, and will always be as a governor who deals with this, set metrics and let us get there. Set reasonable, realistic metrics. Don't prescribe how we meet those metrics. And that exists in everything, but particularly in these things, because the way they do it in Arizona and the way we do it in North Dakota is going to be different. We have bridge needs, they have bridge needs. You touched on it. We don't have 118-degree heat. We have 60 below wind chill. And we have, a lot of different issues. So I appreciate when we start talking about resiliency and we talk about all of these things, but the hair on the back of my neck goes up because I think it's just going to make it slower and slower and slower. If you can set metrics that are reasonably attainable and don't slow down the process, we'll meet them. We know how to do it. Our construction guys, our state guys, they want to do it. We don't want to rebuild it. We don't want to have to fix it any more than we have to. So that would be my advice or request.
Thank you, Senator. We talked about the philosophy of the users of infrastructure paying for infrastructure and having consistent funding. I think that's really important. But I think even when you have that, if we can't go from allocating dollars to actually getting projects done, I don't think anything is more frustrating than that. Than hearing about infrastructure spending, but actually not seeing projects get completed. So to me, it comes back to permitting and regulatory reform so we can shorten the time between allocating dollars and getting a project actually completed.
Yeah, time is money. Inflationary costs, things happen. You thought you had enough money. I know that our highway funding in Ohio, we thought we had enough money when we passed the last gas tax, but then the whole inflationary thing happened over the course of time. Now that money is not adequate to the task. So the longer it takes, the less value your money has.
Mayor, we all know that we have the most innovative country when it comes to transportation. The discretionary grants have been so helpful in pushing that innovation and getting that technology deployed. I spoke earlier about how we have a backlog of maintenance on our bridges. For us, we're always going to put dollars to safety first. We got to make sure our roadways are safe. But because of some of the discretionary grants we've been able to receive, we're looking at technologies that do things like speed freight traffic. And that is good news for America. When manufacturers can get their goods where they're going more quickly, that's dollars in their pockets, that's American jobs, and just the incredible innovation that comes out of these discretionary grants will put our country in a great place to continue to lead the way.
Yeah, I'm going to run out of time here, but the idea of, again, I'll come back to, I like the idea of setting the metrics. It's a solid approach to doing this, and everything we can do to save you time would be helpful. Any other thoughts, Governor?
Yeah, I will reiterate what Mr. Ramirez said. I mean, none of this works without streamlining permitting, and I think roads are the perfect example. You don't have to stop linear infrastructure everywhere. You only have to stop at one spot. I mean, if there's a road from Ohio to North Dakota, they can stop it anywhere. They can stop at Minnesota, they can stop at North Dakota, they can stop it in Ohio, they can stop it in Indiana.
Thank you.
Senator Blunt Rochester.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the ranking member, and thank you to all of the panelists. It's good to see my former ENC colleague as well. I've heard from folks up and down my state about their priorities for the next surface transportation reauthorization bill. And your perspectives and this hearing is really very helpful as we craft it. My colleagues have heard me mention the Reconnecting Communities program before, and this program addresses physical barriers and connects people to jobs, essential services, and economic opportunities, while correcting historic injustices and harms to communities due to past infrastructure decisions. And so our goal is to make the best decisions for all of us. And I was grateful to get this into this program into the bipartisan infrastructure law during my time in the House. Mayor Gallego, the city of Phoenix received one of the last rounds of RCP planning awards. Can you tell us a little bit about the Grand Canalscape project and why this funding is so essential?
Thank you. Phoenix is grateful for your leadership on this project. It makes so much sense for us. Maybe a surprise to some people, Phoenix has more miles of canals than Venice.
Wow.
The canal system was really important for delivering water infrastructure to farms in Phoenix's early days, but it's now become a really important transportation corridor. Unfortunately, there's some major conflicts now with rail. There is not currently a safe way to cross the rail at one part of the Grand Canal. It also has a real challenge with freeway. Unfortunately, when you don't give people a safe way to cross, they still cross. And so the Reconnecting Communities grant really helps us to make sure that we can do that in a way that keeps our residents safe. When you have a major crash, including fatalities along rail, it shuts down the rail system. And so we're so grateful to have that support. These projects are enormously complicated, and we couldn't deliver it without federal partnership.
And could you talk a little bit about what will happen if we fail to reauthorize the Connecting Communities program? Would the city of Phoenix be able to deliver on this project?
Unfortunately, this project is enormously complex, and we really need the federal partnership. I should take the time to say thank you, because these investments allow us to save lives. And I get to meet the people who live along the way and who don't have to worry about their kids running across a rail anymore. And I don't know that you always get to. So on their behalf, thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. I think the reality is there are members on both sides of the dais who have multiple projects that will benefit, including in my home state, at the top of our state in Wilmington, all the way down to our rural counties in Georgetown, Delaware. And so it's vitally important, and we want to continue this. And so I'll be introducing legislation to get this done, and I urge my colleagues to join me in expanding the Reconnecting Communities program in the next surface transportation bill. I'd like to shift gears a little bit to digital infrastructure. Mayor, you also spoke a little bit about encouraging smart technology and AI, and I'd love to ask you and the governor, how could increased investment in digital infrastructure, things like radar-based detection systems at intersections to live travel advisories, contribute to safety and mobility on our roads alongside traditional physical infrastructure?
Just, I think piggybacking a little bit off of what the mayor said on safety, our legislature passed a bill, raised our speed limit, raised our fines, but that's probably not the safest, part of the bill. We are now doing digital speed limits and requirements when we have the adverse weather, which is snow and blizzards and icy roads, and we can do that in real time now. I think if you're talking about mileage and cost, we're looking at running our entire state fleet through an AI program to see how we buy cars, where we park cars. Are we driving them too much? Are we not driving them enough? So I think there's real opportunities to do a lot of these things. And then I think, just from the way you model out infrastructure, knowing what your traffic flow is and knowing where it's at, and it doesn't matter if it's in a rural state like North Dakota or on the East Coast, you can prioritize where you're spending this money and then spending it better.
Great, thank you.
We have been lucky to have received federal support for advanced signals. Signal technology is so important to the city of Phoenix. We can give our firefighters signal priority so they can get where they're going more quickly. If you are experiencing a stroke, the amount of time while your brain does not receive blood is really important. Seconds matter. And so giving our firefighters a little bit of an advantage matters so much. We also have a real challenge with, unfortunately, pedestrian fatalities and red light running. There's technology today that we are going to be able to install thanks to the Infrastructure and Jobs Act that can stop a signal if someone is in the intersection and save a life. Yeah. I had a very important boss who was killed in one of these accidents, and I hope my work as mayor of Phoenix will mean that fewer people don't have to go through that, but your investment in this technology helps us save lives.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will be pushing for digital infrastructure formula funding, and hopefully that will save more lives. Thank you so much, and I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Bozeman.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ranking Member, for holding this important hearing today. Governor Armstrong, in Arkansas, 43% of our residents live in rural areas, and we rank 16th for fatality rates on rural roads and 3rd for rural pavements in poor condition. Some federal programs like NEVI and PROTECT can make it harder for states to target those basic rural road needs. From your perspective, how can Congress better structure funding programs to give states more flexibility to invest where it's most needed, especially for rural safety and road conditions?
Well, the one thing I've learned about all of this is that funds are fungible. So the more you are doing into these specialty programs, the less likelihood that places like rural Arkansas and rural North Dakota, it's not whether or not they qualify, they're not going to apply. I mean, we're just trying to get county roads built. Like we're not interested in the other side of it. So I would say that the more flexibility do you give on a real basis for recognizing it's not always population based, it's economy based, it's economies of scale based. And then I think one thing is recognizing that rural infrastructure is more expensive per mile than urban infrastructure in a lot of ways. And it's really hard to deliver whatever service it is to that last mile. But oftentimes that last mile is producing a ton of economic activity that the world needs. Farm equipment's getting heavier, grain trucks are getting bigger, economies of scale in that industry are going up. And so making sure that we aren't, all of these things are worthy to debate and discuss, but not at the expense of the places that are producing the things and just don't have, like, we don't have barriers to connecting communities other than 100 miles.
Right. Along the same line, Governor, you're well aware that of the programs that bring delays and extra costs because of burdensome applications and uncertain timelines. However, some major projects like large rural highway upgrades or critical freight corridors are simply too expensive for states to tackle with formula funds alone, which you just alluded to. That's why large competitive grant programs are so valuable when used well. What are your thoughts on the effectiveness of big grant programs and the need to cut red tape and make sure federal dollars get turned into projects on the ground faster?
We appreciate the grant programs as much as we can get them, yes. The quicker you can deploy the money. I mean, I don't know if you'll find a rural governor that wouldn't like block grants in every area of this versus the requirement side of it, but not at the expense of formula funding. I think, and the more flexibility we're given in that is better. I mean, the grant, I mean, we've utilized the grant programs, they've been really good. I mean, we care about ports too in North Dakota. We care about them a lot. Our products get there and we need them to get there. But at the same time, we want to be able to have a more reasonable and reliable cost analysis for the next construction season so we can better spend the dollars you send to us.
Very good. Mr. Ramirez, you know firsthand that strong infrastructure is critical to manufacturing competitiveness. Rural areas produce a significant share of our nation's manufacturing and farming output, yet population decline and shrinking tax bases make it harder to modernize roads and bridges. What federal investments or policy reforms would best help manufacturers in rural states remain efficient and connected to national and global markets?
Thank you, Senator. Great question. And, it's true. Most things don't get made in big cities. We manufacture in rural environments, and that's certainly true for Husco, and I think most manufacturers across our country. I feel a little bit like a broken record, but I really think the key is around permitting reform and not just getting dollars allocated, but getting projects completed.
Right. Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and want to welcome the witnesses. And you're going to see a theme, I think, here on this issue of permitting reform. This committee has a long, I think, real positive history of producing significant bipartisan infrastructure, and I'm really hopeful that we can under the chairman and ranking member's leadership. Do that again with this highway bill, but the key's got to be permitting reform. I think even my friends on the other side of the aisle, who, let's face it, oftentimes resist it, because you got far left radical environmental groups who love the fact that NEPA takes 10 years, because you can't build anything then. They do, that's a fact. I see it in my state all the time. But Governor, let me start with you. You know, my state, Alaska, is resource-rich, infrastructure-poor. We have less road miles than Connecticut, and we're almost 120 times bigger than Connecticut, and a lot more natural resources in Connecticut. So how do we ensure that a highway bill for the whole country takes into account places like my state or your state that have huge resource potential, but not nearly the number of roads that we need, that the rest of the East Coast has? 82% of the communities in Alaska are not even connected by a road. So how do we make progress in that regard?
I think the first and most important answer is an equitable formula that gives states maximum flexibility on how to spend their money. Secondly, I think there's two ways infrastructure gets beat up. How heavy is it, or how much is it driven on? Those are the two ways infrastructure gets beaten up. You might not have as many miles driven or as many vehicles traveling on any of those roads, but the things you're doing in Alaska are pretty heavy.
Yeah.
And they're pretty important. And so recognizing that you factor those things in, but eventually I think the answer to the simple portion, the implementation is really hard, right? But the simple portion is making sure you have an equitable formula that gives states the maximum amount of flexibility and certainty.
Great. Mr. Ramirez, let me go to permitting reform. It's such an important issue. The Supreme Court and its 7-county infrastructure coalition versus Eagle County was a great course correction on NEPA, saying, look, this is a procedural, not a substantive law. You don't need 10,000 pages in 10 years. We had a gold mine in Alaska, the Kensington mine. It's now employing about 450 people in Southeast Alaska. That's producing gold for America. It took 20 years to permit. We had a big infrastructure development project on the Kenai Peninsula. It was a road. It took 36 years to permit. I think it was the world record on NEPA slowness. So I think even my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who have always blocked permitting reform, that's the dark, deep secret here. You have my Democrat colleagues, hey, we want permitting reform, we want permitting reform. Then you go to them with common sense approaches and they don't do it because their far left groups tell them not to. But I think even my Democrat colleagues now want to see this because they see everything. Renewables, any project is blocked by this real bad implementation. NEPA had a good goal at the beginning, but it's been totally abused and hijacked by groups that don't want to build, certainly don't want to build in my state. So what are the real key elements? By the way, we got some NEPA reform in the budget reconciliation bill. I really want to thank the chairman for staying on that. It's pretty good, actually. But what would you say are the key elements that I hope my Democrat colleagues can get behind on NEPA reform that everybody in the country wants? Every Democrat governor, every Democrat mayor, I'm sure the mayor here wants it. I mean, it's nuts that it takes 10 years on average to permit a bridge. No wonder why China's kicking our butt on so many of these things. So what would you think are the key elements of NEPA permitting reform that we need for this bill?
Thank you, Senator. I'd offer two principles that I think would solve the majority of the problems. One is going in up front to have a regulatory process that has enforceable deadlines. That can't go on forever.
Both at the agency level and at the litigation court level.
That was going to be the second part. So I think going in and having deadlines for the regulatory agencies and then having an expedited judicial review process so it can't be tied up in litigation forever. If you apply those two principles across our regulatory system, I think we could see a real change.
Very common sense. I hope my colleagues on the other side of the aisle embrace those because they're common sense. The whole darn country wants them. And let's not let some far left groups who always hate NEPA reform drive the agenda for America. Nobody wants 10 years to permit a bridge, 20 years to permit a gold mine. And unfortunately, that's what NEPA has done to our country. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mayor Gallego, thank you again for being here. As you know, better than probably anybody, Phoenix is a urban heat island experiencing higher temperatures than the surrounding rural areas due to the lack of vegetation and the use of asphalt and concrete that absorb a lot of the heat. An estimated 45% of Metro Phoenix residents live in an area where the urban heat island effect raises temperatures by about 8 degrees or more. And this is why I worked to include the Healthy Streets program, which I think you mentioned in your opening remarks, and we put that in the bipartisan infrastructure law, which would fund initiatives such as cool pavement projects that mitigate the effects of this extreme heat. So, Mayor, why is it critical for Congress to fund programs that help vulnerable cities like Phoenix become more resilient to the effects of extreme heat?
Thank you for your leadership on that program. We are at a point now where we are going to have to adapt cities to hotter environments. Phoenix now talks to cities all around the country, including in the northernmost parts of our country, about heat challenges. This is a national problem, and we appreciate you coming up with a national solution. The heat can be deadly. We are losing more Americans to heat than any other type of natural disaster, but our infrastructure funding hasn't caught up with that reality yet. Even some of the coldest states in the country have had terrible heat waves with an incredible loss of life. We know the solutions. There are building material changes, design changes that can save lives. Your program will help cities, rural communities, tribes get the funding to make those changes, many of which require us to design infrastructure very differently.
I had a roundtable back in Phoenix on extreme heat just last week, and the number of deaths nationwide from extreme heat exceed every other natural disaster combined. It is a real problem that, and it's also associated with the thing we're going to talk about next here. I want to a little bit about energy. It's our grid. The grid goes down in Phoenix. The estimates are that somewhere up to maybe half of the residents of the city will wind up in an emergency room if it happens during a certain time of year in the summer when the heat is the highest. So I want to talk about mentioning electricity here. Data centers, chip manufacturing, and other industrial expansion in Phoenix is putting pressure on our infrastructure. And as our population grows to fuel this technology boom, how does our electrical and transportation infrastructure need to respond? And this, since this is transportation, maybe we should focus on that.
Right. Well, when you look at, so we are seeing a huge boom in data center and advanced manufacturing. Just in the Phoenix metro, the data centers have requested 32 gigawatts of new electricity. The amount of damage that, well, the impact this would have on our streets with all of these construction, these are huge construction sites. In our case, we have it, in many cases, right up against residential, so very high impact, and you're seeing a lot of truck traffic. Water is a different impact, but the amount of infrastructure investment is something we really need to talk about. Data centers are very vulnerable to heat, so the cooling impact in a community
And to
like
put the
Phoenix,
32 gigawatts into perspective, the current SRP and APS, the two utilities, provide about 16 for the entire county right now. So the requested over a number of years, I think it's 5 to 10 years, exceeds what is currently on the grid right now.
It does, and this is a trend we're not talking about enough as a country. What does it mean if in a few short years we're asking our utilities to completely replicate themselves? I'm so grateful for paying attention to the infrastructure side of that, because the amount of traffic in areas that have not seen traffic, we should probably talk about hazardous materials on our streets. They will be going places they haven't, and it may be time to have new conversations about that. The data centers, there's a conversation in Arizona and several other states about small modular reactors, so that would put nuclear material in areas that have not seen nuclear material before. Phoenix is the 5th largest city in the country. Our transportation department needs your support to navigate that, as do our firefighters and others who will need new types of training. If we are going to see this change, we have to look at how it impacts our street network. There might be some time where we might also be able to reduce regulation, particularly around semiconductors. There's some hazardous material regulation that we might be able to update to be able to make it a little bit easier to do business. But it really is time to look at the types of material that will be traveling on streets that have never seen it before and how we have the appropriate regulatory system from the federal government for these issues.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Senator Ricketts.
Thank you, Chairman Capito, and thank you for your dedication providing a strong foundation for the next Surface Transportation Reauthorization Bill. Hearings like this are invaluable as we work to build legislation that will address key transportation infrastructure issues. So thank you, Chairman Capito, and thank you, Ranking Member Whitehouse, for holding today's hearing, and thank you to the witnesses for coming here today. Governor Armstrong, welcome to Washington. I've talked before this committee about needing the flexibility in the next reauthorization, and I've been looking for some ways to be able to provide that flexibility through the infrastructure supply chain. You're from an agricultural state, as I am. Agricultural products are a large part of the infrastructure advantage that we have in being able to provide that. I know this is especially true in Nebraska, and one of the things that I found when I was governor was that oftentimes my Department of Transportation thought their customer was the road, not the people who drove on the road. We have $9.9 billion in agricultural exports every year, and I'm sure North Dakota has got a lot of agricultural exports as well. So transporting these goods is vital for both of our states and the country's economic growth. That's why I recently introduced the Variance Act with my colleague Senator Schiff. This would allow a 10% axle variance for vehicles transporting dry bulk goods. As you know, sometimes corn that's going to shift around a little bit, so you can't necessarily keep this corn or the soybeans over every axle. So to give some flexibility and then increase efficiency and safety and cost effectiveness as well. So this is one that I hope that in many ways we can look at the PW committee to be able to go forward on. Governor Armstrong, you know, where have you and your DOT experienced regulatory roadblocks, and how can Congress best address these things in the next reauthorization?
I'll deal with one we haven't talked about yet, which is rail. And the thing with rail is we're trying to get to our friends on the coast to get our products to port. And eventually you run into bottlenecks. And sometimes it's a state line with different political ideologies. Sometimes it's just a place in which you can't get it in the ground. And so we can build the front end infrastructure, and North Dakota's done a really great job of that. But eventually we can only build our infrastructure out enough that it can get through Montana, Idaho, Washington to the port. So I think understanding that the ability to do those things only works in North Dakota if it works all the way to where it's going. And the more you create that, and Senator Ricketts, you'll understand this as well, I want as much competition in the marketplace for my ag producers as humanly possible. And then another one, which isn't necessarily this, but we should hold our frenemies accountable for the amount of empty shipping containers that are floating around the world on a daily basis. And I think that's one thing that's not always front of mind, but really, really affects the transportation side and the cost side of my ag producers getting things to markets.
Have you, just on that issue, have you found that you've had trouble getting containers to North Dakota because of that?
Yes, I mean, and
Or rail cars?
either trouble in supply or trouble in cost.
Yeah, great. Well, hey, thank you for that feedback on that. And I know that working with Union Pacific is headquartered in Nebraska, and I know that they've had issues with regard to transporting coal to get to export on the West Coast ports because, again, local state regulations blocking that, which is it's a legal product, yet you have, again, local state rules that are blocking just the pass-through of that product to get to foreign markets.
For all of the expansion of the interstate commerce clause, there are some places where it is necessary. I don't have a port in North Dakota. I have to get my products to a port.
Yeah, point well taken. Thank you, Governor. Mr. Ramirez, you are the president and CEO of a manufacturing company. I'm sure you've run into various issues as well. One of the problems we've had in Nebraska is a project can be all the way through the permitting process, including in the endangered species consultations, but if the status of a species changes during that process and before the final NEPA approval, then the whole thing has got to start all over again. And you mentioned a couple of issues to Senator Sullivan with regard to, kind of bigger picture things of making sure that we've got timelines and that you've put limits on the litigation. Are there other specific things like what I just described that would be great reforms to be able to think about as we go through a permitting process type reform?
I think the concept of categorical exclusions is another one that I probably should have brought up earlier, but for similar types of infrastructure, having similar types of environmental reviews, again, that just strikes me as a common sense way to help expedite this process without giving up any of the robustness that our citizens expect.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Ramirez, and thank you, Chairman.
Senator Alsobrooks.
Thank you so much to Chair Capito and Ranking Member Whitehouse for holding today's hearing. And thank you as well to all of our witnesses for joining us. Surface transportation is a vital part of everyday life, connecting people to jobs, education, and essential services. Decades of underinvestment, however, have left much of our country's infrastructure in poor condition, leading to traffic congestion and safety concerns. The bipartisan infrastructure law sought to address these issues by providing unprecedented investments to create a more reliable, sustainable, and equitable transportation network while creating jobs. For Maryland, which is my state, this meant dedicated funding targeting the repair of thousands of miles of deteriorating roads and hundreds of structurally deficit bridges. This piece of legislation also provided over $1.7 billion for public transit, helping to modernize buses, trains, and rail lines, and provided funding to programs that seek to improve transportation equity and safety. As the ranking member of EPW's Subcommittee on Transportation and Infrastructure and a member of the Banking Committee, I look forward to working with my colleagues here to ensure that the next authorization provides long-term predictable investments that repair our aging infrastructure, improve safety, and support economic development. So my first question is for Governor Armstrong. Welcome, Governor. Many rural counties, including those in Maryland, face unique challenges when it comes to roadway safety, like long stretches of unlit roads, limited emergency response, and aging infrastructure. So I wonder whether you believe that current federal safety programs provide states with sufficient flexibility to effectively address these unique risks.
I'll like it better if yours and Senator Kramer's bill passes.
Yes, exactly.
And I think it's important, and even through the course of this hearing, the different things that exist. But and I said this regarding bridges, we also, we have to do a better job of building out safety corridors as well. But recognizing that delivering those services in rural areas is really, really difficult. And it's really difficult if there's 4 feet of snow on the ground and the wind is blowing 30 miles an hour. So the more flexibility we're allowed, the better we can have. And one of the things that is unique to a place like North Dakota is you have a bad winter and a late thaw, and all of a sudden I have a county problem or a DOT problem that nobody knew about until May 1st. Yeah. And if you are really restricted in how you utilize the money that is available to you, you are legitimately fixing things that would go 25 spots down the priority area because you're not allowed to use the money for the one that should be number one.
I totally get it. I was a former county executive of my county and understand so well exactly what you described. Next, I just have a question for Mayor Gallego. The Federal Highway Administration's PROTECT program is a critical new funding source for states and cities working to strengthen the resilience of their infrastructure. Maryland has used this funding to assess and strengthen at-risk coastal infrastructure and evacuation routes. So I wonder, how is it that the city of Phoenix, if you can just talk to us a bit about how you've tackled the broader challenges of infrastructure resilience in the face of extreme heat, flooding, and other climate-related risks?
Thank you so much. We're thrilled to have someone who understands local government advocating for the PROTECT program. For us, we have hit record after record in terms of heat, and our infrastructure was not built with that in mind. The Protect Grow program, just as it helps you with sea level rise, helps us with infrastructure that may literally melt because of the heat. It allows us to invest in more advanced building materials that are more heat resilient and that also don't maintain the heat as much. We are going to need to redesign our network for a hotter environment. Protect gives us the chance to try innovation. I would very much like Phoenix to be the lead in developing the technologies for our transportation future around heat resilience, which I think will become important to more and more of the community. And Protect allows us to be innovative, to take risks and do things we haven't done before, as well as to deploy solutions we have proven work.
Right. You know, next I'd like to go back to Governor Armstrong. You know, the Federal Highway Administration's Emergency Relief Program is a vital federal tool for restoring damaged infrastructure and ensuring safety after disasters like the bridge collapse. And as you know, firsthand, Maryland had the Key Bridge collapse. So I wonder whether North Dakota has benefited from this program, if you can just talk quickly about it.
We utilize, I say this and I may get tongue in cheek, what other people call climate change, we usually call Tuesday. I mean, we can have 100-degree swings in October in the same town. So we have utilized it for, I mean, the last time I remember was actually the 2011 flood and when our capital city flooded and utilizing the fund to get, I mean, it's capital city of the state of North Dakota. We had bridges, we had highways, we had county roads that without the federal government's help, we would not have been able to recover nearly as fast.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Markey, I'd give you a second here, but you're up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our debate about this surface transportation bill must begin with the question, what do Americans want out of their surface transportation system? And I think it's fair to say they want it to be safe. They want it to be affordable. And they want a system that does not further exacerbate the climate crisis. So let's evaluate how we're performing in these categories. On the topic of safety, our transportation system is a disaster. 40,000 people are dying every year on our roads, and this is no accident. Many of our roads are designed only for fast-moving cars, not for pedestrians, for cyclists, or for public transit, all of which are safer modes of travel with the right infrastructure in place. So that's a failure. Now let's examine transportation affordability. On this front, too, we are failing. The Department of Transportation estimates its costs on average Americans are $12,000 a year to own and operate one automobile, $12,000 a year. Many communities are left without other viable transportation options, requiring family to travel by way of car for almost every trip, increasing their costs. That is a failure. And then, of course, when it comes to sustainability, our system is performing poorly. The transportation sector is the largest contributor to greenhouse gases in our country. We have a system that invests more money in expanding highways than it does in building sustainable infrastructure. That is a failure. Our communities feel these failures every day in higher costs, worse air quality, a deteriorating climate, and the loss of loved ones in car crashes. So, Mayor Gallego, do you agree that local communities most directly feel the pain of our failing transportation system? And we just love to get your expert view on that issue.
Thank you. We are faced with a climate crisis right now in Phoenix. We had a month straight above 110 last year. We hit 118 this month. Your constituents might put mittens on their children in the winter. We sometimes do it in the summer because a seatbelt buckle can burn your hand. So we need to make sure 118 is hot enough. It is too hot, and we have to make sure that we address this. We have to design a transportation system that is resilient. We need the right building materials for our roads. We need to make sure our transit hubs have shade and are comfortable so that people can be safe while using it. So we really appreciate your leadership on this.
Yep. And we're seeing it as well in New England. The Gulf of Maine, we call it Boston Harbor. After the Arctic, it's the second fastest warming body of water in the world. So we're seeing it, and it's setting up conditions for a catastrophic storm, for absolute disaster. So we're seeing it. No one can escape this. So I agree with your testimony, and that is why I'm soon going to be reintroducing my Green Streets Act, which would reimagine how we prioritize transportation infrastructure investments. The bill would require states to invest in infrastructure like walking and biking and public transit that will reduce emissions, bring down costs, and prevent more loss of life. The bill would also require states to maintain their facilities in a state of good repair before expanding highways further. Well-maintained roads are safer, they're better for emissions, and they mean fewer potholes, flat tires, broken axles for American travelers. The Green Streets Act is, of course, a climate bill, but it is also a safety and it is also an affordability bill as well. Because research indicates a 20% reduction in the number of miles traveled by car in this country would reduce vehicle fuel and maintenance costs for the average American family by roughly $2,000 annually. Even more importantly, the same reduction in miles traveled by car would save 180,000 lives by the year 2050 in our country. If there's anything more American than an automobile, it's consumer choice. And American families deserve a publicly funded transportation system that affords them the choice to travel safely, affordably, and sustainably. And I look forward to working with my colleagues on this committee, with you, Madam Mayor, with all concerned citizens in our country to ensure that the next surface transportation bill addresses these issues. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you. I think we're coming to the end of our hearing. I appreciate everybody's your testimony. I think there's a lot of similarities in what everybody's saying from the different standpoints of where you are. Permitting is something that Senator Whitehouse and I and our staffs talk about almost daily, and we know that this is at the heart of the efficiency that I think most folks and how the dollars can go farther than they can. So with that, I have no more comment. Do you have a comment?
Just to emphasize the comment that I repeatedly make, which is that any bipartisan bill that does either surface transportation or permitting reform is going to have things in it that one side likes more than the other side likes. That's the nature of compromise on large pieces of legislation. Essential to going forward is some level of trust that the implementer of that legislation will be an honest implementer. And if we're going to have to continue to live through this selective refusal to release appropriated and obligated funds, if we're going to have to deal with an implementer that will favor, for instance, only the fossil fuel projects but not the clean energy projects, that's a huge deterrent to getting this done. I know I'm not saying anything new here. It's obvious to anybody who's ever been involved in a negotiation in which the implementer has to be trusted to make it work. We are not at that place yet by any stretch, but I have nevertheless instructed my team to go forward and try to get big bills done, and we can get through that gate when we need to. But I don't want anybody to be caught by surprise later on when we come to that gate and we don't see an implementer that we can trust, and things come to a halt that is unexpected or surprises anybody. So we're going forward in good faith. The chairman has been very good to work with, and I think, you know, we can have some confidence that we can do these big things. But at the end of the day, there will be a gate that we have to get through, and that gate will be no more monkeying around with faithful execution of the laws for partisan or special interest purposes. Simple as that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Whitehouse. I can't resist, but I said the irony of what you've just said describes the pain I felt over the last 4 years. Because the way we wrote the highway bill, the way the implementation and the guidance that went through went far afield from what the original intent of the bill was. But we can argue about that, and so I understand what you're saying.
Yep.
And I think you're right, but I think you're right only because we've lived through this over the last 4 years. So with no further questions, I'd like to ask the witness and all my colleagues for your participation today. Senators who wish to submit written questions for the record have until 5 p.m. on Wednesday, July 30th, to do so. The witnesses' responses to those questions are due back to the committee no later than 5 on Wednesday, August the 13th, and will be submitted for the record. With that, the hearing is adjourned, and thank you all very much.